Now we'll look at some grading techniques and tips that will help you when sorting your spat from the hatchery or for delivery to farmers.
Now what Ben is about to do is pretty much a regular exercise. This will happen at least every week within the hatchery as we start to grade.
For this demonstration, we'll separate the larger spat out of a new family line at the Port Stephens hatchery. Most of the spat are between 1200 and 1800 microns in size.
Now the first thing Ben's going to do is give them a wash to get rid of any... at this stage you can use either, but in this particular case we're using salt. You can use fresh if you want to. Probably start to think about using fresh once they get to around this size. It helps to keep any fouling down on the outside. They're fine with fresh water at this stage, particularly for this purpose. So first thing is give them a clean, get them all off the screens, and then put them onto the grading screen. Now it's worth wandering over and having a look inside the little container there to see how much water there is. This is a particularly flash grading device, so I know a lot of you use buckets and half drums and so on. If you've got some time, this does make life a little bit easier. So you can see them there. Ben's selected a grading screen. What size have you got, Ben?
All the spat should pass through this 2mm screen, except the very largest shells which may get wedged in the mesh. These will need to be brushed loose. When you're doing this, make sure the screen you're washing is positioned over a screen with smaller mesh to catch the spat as they're washed free.
If I stick my screen here and start to hose them down, anything that starts to flow down and comes out, I've lost for good, sort of thing. So always make sure that we've got the screen over another screen. I find just giving a little bit of a gentle rub to the back of the screen helps to just push those that are caught back the other way. So now what we would do is, I think we've got a tag on it here somewhere, we would actually get a bit of duct tape and we would cut a tag similar to that sort of size, what the actual batch is. Sorry. And now we would put the size grade on there as well. So that would be 2000 micron retained. So we'd write 2000 on there. We can go and put that back in the system, so that doesn't need to be left out to air dry, and we can get back to voluming that again within the sort of the next hour or so, like whenever we get through all our gradings for that day, sort of thing. So basically you can see now that we've got everything that's gone through. With this grading system, it's very important that we don't just pull the plug straight out because things bounce straight off the bottom screen. So I've got a screen underneath.
Which is smaller?
Yep, that's 200 micron screen.
This 200 micron screen is fine enough to catch all the spat in the batch. Only fragments of dead shell will pass through it.
Okay, so now we just gently wash the remaining spat down.
So you got somebody to make this up for you?
This has been around for nearly as long as the hatchery. It's been around for quite a while. For you guys, there are many different ways you can do it. We also do it in just these blue tubs down the bottom here. So if we sort of set that up on a two-tier system, so if we put that on the corner there and done our initial grading in that, and we can put a screen down lower and we can just tip the water off. Without doing it in this system, I can just show you, like, this would be our cheap alternative to going to something like that. These are just the basis of 200 litre drums we've just cut out and put a piece of PVC pipe into. So the same sort of principles would apply. We'd initially we'd just wash off over the screen that we're grading on. Okay, so we'd place the spat onto there, grade them through, remove whatever we had on that screen, wash that into another screen, and then everything that was residual and had gone through, it's easy enough just to pour it off. Obviously we'd put another screen down here, so we'd have another 180 micron screen down in this area. We can just pour this off. Now you find that you'd probably get a heap of spat on the bottom, so again we just grab the hose and just quickly rinse them in to that screen and start the process again, sort of over our next screen. So we've already completed the 2000s. We've got the 2000 micron retained spat here. So Nick's just put them back into the system for us. So the next size screen that we have is an 1800 micron screen. It's a lot easier if you wash the spat into one corner, or at least into one half.
Ben will now wash the spat off the fine 180 micron mesh and through a coarser 1800 screen sitting right underneath it. This will catch most of the largest spat still remaining in the batch. The rest will pass through it and into the tank, from where they'll be drained and caught once again on a very fine screen for further grading.
Rightio, so again we're going through the same sort of process. Okay, so we're starting to get a few more, but again we haven't got that many. No worries, so
Now we'll wash this 1800 micron grade onto its own finer screen to remove it from the grading process.
okay, so there's our grade of 1800s. So I'll just get Nick to write what that is. Would someone like to have a go of actually doing the next? You want to have a go? Sure? Be bold?
Have a go. All right. Just while we're setting up to do the next set of gradings, now that we've got a bit more volunteer, a couple of notes. If you're going to try and make a device like this so that it'll assist you during the grading, and they're a great thing to have, note that there are a couple of bars in the bottom of the tank here so that the grading screen can't rest down on the spat. You've got to be really careful when you're using those as graders. You don't drop the screens down on the spat and crush the spat. They're very small and very delicate. So those bars are there to keep them up off the bottom. Second thing is this level down here is adjustable. It's adjustable so that you can actually use your nursery screens as grading screens. That's fine for this one, but you won't get the big screens in, so you want to go a little bit lower. And the other thing is these legs are adjustable.
She's all yours, mate. Go for it. So just start by washing the screen, sort of washing the spat into one corner or one half of the screen. So if you just hold the hose, so it's sort of slightly kinked, but you can fan it with your hand. Yeah, whatever feels suitable to you, sort of thing. I'll just show you how I do it. I'll probably hold it in two hands a bit more than one and just try and fan it like that. And that way you can adjust the pressure just by moving your fingers. So if you need to push something that's a bigger, a sort of more dense area of spat, you just increase sort of the pressure that you put on the hose itself. Yep, so if you just wash them into that half of the screen to start with, and then we can tip it up and wash it all in. Yep, no, that should be enough, so yep. No worries. So yeah, just sometimes I get caught around the edge of the lip, so just have a look around the inside, like just to make sure. Looks all good. Rightio. No worries. I'll hold it. Only if you get really big air bubbles. Bubbles like this will actually help to push the spat up off the screen and suck them back down. So it creates a little bit of a suction. obviously we don't want massive
is
big air
actually
bubbles, but
for
it only happens
2.5
if you get
mils.
stand there and get really, really vigorous with it sort of thing. Yeah, that looks like it's the goods, mate. So if you just want to stand it into that one there, just tip it up on its side now so that we make sure that it's all there so nothing can come back through. Here's where it's very important with your flow. So if it comes out really fast, you know, like how the big jet just came out before, you can push them straight out of here and they're onto the floor and gone. So just take your time the first few times. It might seem like a bit of a slow sort of arduous task, but you'll find that after 2 or 3 goes, you get such a feel for the way that the water's coming out that you race through it. It looks like we're pretty much there, mate. Okay. We notice that we get a couple that are still stuck, sort of thing, and when we rub our hands over it, it's pretty difficult, sort of thing.
Does that kill?
No, like they're pretty durable by now. Sort of we're up to 1400 microns in size, so they can take a little bit of a roughing, and then maybe just give them one last squirt. Yep, no worries. There we go. Michael's just gone through and demonstrated how to grade the 1400 micron size class here. And in this one you can see that we've actually got a few and we've got enough to do a sizable voluming on. So we're going to move along now to the actual voluming process. So initially what we'll do is we'll volume everything that's on that size grade, and from there we'll work backwards and we'll actually take a voluming of like 3 to 5 mils and we'll do our counts from that. As you would have seen before, like we're not dealing with larger spat, so where Jeff takes 100 spat and actually looks at the volume of those guys, they're for larger size spat. We've got the smaller size classes here, so we actually work on taking a known volume and then counting everything that's in that volume. So we'll get you guys involved in the counting process and just show you how tedious that is. And then you'll have a bit more of an understanding as to how we go through this on sort of a weekly basis. So again, for voluming, we just try and get the spat together all in one area. So we try and push them into as tight a knit sort of corner as we possibly can, because we've actually got to put these guys into a measuring cylinder, and it's nearly impossible for us to start at the top and fan them all down without using really exorbitant amounts of or volumes of water. So that's obviously going to fill up our measuring cylinder. We're going to have stuff that's flowing out everywhere, and when they're at this stage we can actually have spat that flow out with that, so we've got to actually go back and repeat the process. So we try and get it into as tight a corner as we possibly can. Can I just grab that screen as well? And, Nick, you just want to grab the smaller one? Yep. Probably that smallest one, mate. I'll swap you. Okay. Now this is sort of the point where I suppose all your hard work can go down the drain very, very quickly. You get to this stage, especially in a hatchery, where we've looked after these guys for 40, 50 days, and we're getting to the voluming stage. Unless we actually make sure that we've got safety precautions so that we don't lose them, your work disappears very quickly. And I know that we've had a couple of instances where we've had to look around the floor and you're trying to find 100,000 spat that are on the floor. You've just got no chance at all. So it's always good to make sure that you've got safety precautions in. We'll actually just use the prawn tray. It's important that you work off sort of a level surface. Someone wants to just hold that. Thanks, Michael. And our flow control here is very important. If it shoots out really fast like that, you can imagine how fast that's going to knock those spat off the screen. So just got to make sure that we've got a very controlled flow rate.
Ben's actually done this a couple of times before, so he's comfortable using a hose. I want to get a beaker and a pour it in.
Okay, so we've washed them in like so. Now you can see that we've got a bit of water that's actually come back up through the measuring cylinder here into the funnel. So we always make sure that we're definitely over the screen when we're releasing that, and just release the funnel up very slowly. And then we just tip some of the volume of the water off over the screen. So if anything does come out, we make a mistake while we're tipping this up, again, we're quite safe. Right. So then we'll probably move our screen onto a harder surface. Again, making sure that we're relatively safe. And this is where the important part comes in, is tapping them down. I can stick them in there now, and they're, what, 36 mils I've got in there now. So by tapping it down, okay, we're down to 22 mils now. So that's the difference between hundreds and thousands, basically. So it's quite important now that we're at this stage, to be accurate, we have to get that sort of tap down as far as we can. Very, very important. Otherwise, we're going to end up with discrepancies. So you can see now how it's sort of a hard process to gauge just by volume exactly how much is in there. If we had a sheet like the sheet that we use that's been in circulation, and it's got an actual given number for that amount, you can see how by someone just not tapping down properly, it's going to sort of jump around a fair bit.
Just in terms of the tapping down, what you do is you have a look at it as well, and then tap it down, then have another look, and then tap it down a little bit more. And when it taps down, gently you get it down to a fixed volume, so it's not shrinking down anymore. Generally it doesn't take 3/4 of an hour or anything to do it. A minute, 60 seconds is often enough to get it there, but just keep tapping down till it comes down to pretty much a fixed volume.
Again, after tapping that again, we're still at 22 mils. Okay, so we've sort of reached that period where we're comfortable that it's not going to be tapped down any further. Okay, so now what we would probably do is we would rinse that back onto the screen and stick that back into the system, and we go through and do all our gradings. It's probably easier if you go through and do all your gradings first and stick them onto screens and put them back in your system, then come back and do all your volumings, and then from there come back and actually take your samples. It just makes the production of things a little bit more efficient, that's all. If you only want to do one screen at a time, by all means, just do that. It is very important then that you label things properly so that you've got your different size grades, so it's very clear cut as to what you're working with. Okay, so we're going to skip the stage where we sort of just put that back onto the screen, and we're actually going to go to the sampling sort of stage. Have you got that small little...
You're working from volume to a number in this case. Calculations are virtually the same. You've got a demonstration calculation on the sheet that shows how to work from volume back. It's just at this size. If you counted 100, there wouldn't be enough there to really measure it accurately with these sorts of instruments.
All of these measuring cylinders are readily available. They're not tremendously expensive. That small one that Ben has costs $7. These medium sizes for $12 to $15. They're readily available from scientific suppliers. The one that springs to mind is Australian Scientific, just because they're here in Newcastle, so they're close, but there are plenty of people around that can source them for you.
Rightio, so we're at the sampling stage now. We've got our volume, which was 22 mils, so we actually want to find out how many oysters are per mil now. So you guys will have your screen, it'll be sitting in your system, and basically what we'll do is grab a pipette. This is just a makeshift pipette that we've made up. These are just 10 mil pipette tips that we've cut the ends off, and that's just the bulb off a solder sucker, basically. So it's nothing fancy about it. You can use a proper pipette, whatever. Rightio, so we've initially just put some oysters into the measuring cylinder. And we want between sort of a 3 mil and a 5 mil sample, but we want to make sure that if it's either 3 mil, 4 mil, 5 mil, regardless of what it is, that it's exactly on that sort of 3 or 5 mil. And we want to make sure that it's compacted as best we possibly can.
So what you're saying, Ben,
Yep.
3 mils is a minimum.
3 mils is definitely. 3 mils is a minimum for us because we have a measuring cylinder. Ours is what? It's a 25 mil measuring cylinder. It's the smallest one that we've got. And the first marking on it is actually for 2.5 mils. So I know with each measuring cylinder you've got sort of, I don't know, this one would probably tell me on here, it'd be plus or minus to however many, probably half a mil sort of thing. So we want to make sure that we've got enough in there so that doesn't play a significant role in what we're actually measuring. You can go over 5 if you want, you've got to sit there and count them, basically, and good luck to you. But that's only for small spat like these. Obviously, for larger sort of, let's say 2.5 mil, like 3.5 mil, whatever, obviously you would try and take a larger volume and say maybe do 10 mils and tap it down and count out how many in 10 mils, but you'd probably do it by taking out 100 and actually voluming those. You probably wouldn't use this method. This is more a method that you would use initially when you get, your stuff comes from Nick, basically. When you're doing your gradings to start with, so within that first 24-hour sort of period, you would be using this technique. So we've got about 3.5 mils for the purpose of the exercise. Yep, put them into something, a small container, it doesn't have to be a petri dish, etc. As you're going along, you can see that I'm using a fair bit of water, so tip a bit of that off. Probably a good idea to put a screen underneath, etc., so we don't have any mishaps. Even better still is a wash bottle. Okay. And probably the easiest way to get them out is just put a bit of water in, tip it upside down, sort of shake them around a bit. We're using seawater here. I couldn't give you the stats or any scientific evidence to say that tapping them around doesn't annoy the hell out of them, but that's the best sort of method that we've got. Look, if these guys do this either within the first 24 hours, the initial sort of important part is actually getting the grading done and actually getting them onto the screens. As long as you can go back within the day and come back and do all of this, then they're getting a bit of a drink in between sort of thing. They're not out of water for that long. And again, if you're using seawater, like they're in seawater here, so it's not as though they're in fresh water and they're closed up the whole time. Even if they are in fresh water, they're more than capable of withstanding fresh water for an hour or so. So it's not a problem.
But this is only a very small subsample of this fat. This is not everything.
Yeah.
There's a small number out being out of that sort of stuff. You're not, there's even if this was stressing the water.
Okay. So we get to this stage. Now's where the fun begins. We know that we've got 3.5 mils here. So what we do is we always have a sample with what has to be counted. We'll have a sample container of what we're counting at the time and one that we've counted, sort of thing. So we sort of, if you find yourself a bit of bench space, you don't need that much. So what we'll do, you can take it as fast or as slow as you want. So basically now we just get in there and we start counting. That's what our clickers are here for. So we start counting. You can see that we're just using paper clips that have got a bit of an end on them. It's nothing fancy about it. It's nothing flash. It's got to get in there and do the hard work.
Remember also that we'll have to count 3 samples of this size grade to get a fair average of spat numbers per mil.
Ben's going to count 2,355 here, and so it's going to take him a while. And it's pretty easy to lose track, so they're really valuable.
Definitely. And also, it's a good idea, like, if I do that many, if I've got a piece of paper next to me, I actually write down the number of what I end up with for that batch, turn it back to 0 and start again. And that way, if I get halfway through one batch and my counter stuffs up or something like that, then I haven't got to go back and count all this again and start back from the start. I know that I've just got to count what's in that Petri dish there again. So basically, at the end of that, we'll come up with a number. So we'll divide that number by 3.5. So then we'll have how many spat per mil, sort of thing. And then we can work out, we had 22 mils, so we times our number by 22 mils. So simple mathematics.
It's often hard to get a really flat top on your spat sample. This can make measuring a challenge.
Basically, it's going to vary a little bit. You're not going to get a perfect straight line across. That's where a bit of the discrepancy is going to come in as well. You want to be as close to that point as possible. So if you can look through it and it's on the line, you can be pretty comfortable that it's reasonably flat. And it's going to be so hard to get these perfectly flat and square. You'll be there all day trying to do it. So you might have a little bit of a rise at one end. It might only be a very slight rise, but it's going to be there nevertheless. You're just going to have to take that not even into account. You're just going to have to